Student accommodation is one of the most exciting positive cash flow strategies in the South African economy. If you're not sure what positive cash flow means, please go and look at my other video called Positive Cash Flow and then proceed through this educational. During this quick 15-minute educational, I'm going to be sharing with you what the student landscape looks like in South Africa and why it's such a positive cash flowing investment. I'll also take you through a live review of Hatfield, which is one of the prominent student hubs in South Africa, situated in Gauteng, Pretoria.
I educate people to reach financial freedom through property through cash flow positive investments, specializing in the low income multi-let residential market.
Now, the student accommodation is a multi-let sub-strategy where instead of having multiple people in your property, you just have multiple students. So you can buy a house of 5 bedrooms, put in 5 to 10 students, or you can actually develop a student house, whatever it may be. But the concept is that you have multiple tenants. These tenants are of the student nature, and you're obviously collecting more rent than your expenses, leaving you with a positive cash flow. So the two important things that you have to get right for student accommodation is proximity and yield. Proximity, it has to be within proximity of a university. Every student wants to be within walking distance or at least within public transport distance of a university, a college, or some sort of educational institute. And the yield has to be good. The gross yield has to be 20% or more, and the effective yield needs to be 15% plus. Effective yield is the effective time period that students rent, which is 10 months as opposed to 12 months. So if you want to work out your effective yield, you take your monthly rent, times it by 10 to get your effective annual profit or annual revenue divided by your purchase price. So I've gone ahead and looked at 3 different areas, Free State, as one of them to show you which areas could work for student accommodation. So the first one I looked at was Vista Park South. Here's an example of a property in this area, 5 bedroom, going for 1.3 million with the potential of 20,000 Rand rent. So the effective yield, 20,000 rent times 10 months of the year that tenants rent from, divided by purchase price, gives you a 15.3% effective yield. Fantastic. That's a potential area. Willows, which is close to CUT, another 5 bedroom with the potential rent of 28,500, and again an effective yield above 15%. That's what we're looking for. Proximity to the university and a yield, effective yield that is above 15%. I also had a look at Gauteng. Here we've got Vredesdorp, which is in the CBD, close to Braamfontein, that kind of area. Here's a 10-bedroom house for sale for 1.5 with the potential of 32,500 Rand in rent, effective yield of 21.6. Amazing. You're going to be smiling all the way to the bank with a great, juicy, positive cash flow investment. West Dean, this is more of an upper market area in the Gauteng-Joburg region. All right, here you've got a 12-bedroom house for sale for 2.5. With 48,000 Rand in rent, you're looking at an effective yield of 23% on this specific deal. Fantastic. The last regional area that I had a look at was Western Cape. Now, Stellenbosch is close to the Stellenbosch University. So here's one property going for 3.2 million. That's a premium price. It's only making 34,000 Rand in rent. So your yield is under 15%. Although I think Stellenbosch, there are some good deals to be had, this specific one would be a cash flow negative investment because the yield is too low. Unless you get a nice juicy discount, right? Woodstock, another very popular area in the Western Cape. Here is a 13-bedroom house for sale going for under 4 million. With 50,000 Rand rent, you're getting a 24% yield. As an example, let me show you one of my student houses, which is based out here in Cape Town in an area called Observatory. The property is called 6 Donna Street. The inside is catered towards student housing, and we are registered with NSFAS as a provider for this kind of accommodation. The numbers are really juicy and exciting. We've got a bond on this property, got 100% finance for 12,500 Rand in terms of monthly repayments. There's rates and taxes, utilities, provisions. Obviously, we're only working on a 10-month cycle, not a 12-month cycle, so our provisions are really high that account for that. We're making 49,000 Rand in monthly rental with a cash flow of 15,700. The reason why we're able to get a lot of students into the property is because of the size of the property, but also because of the demand. The demand for student housing is tremendous in certain areas, specifically close to UCT. There is a massive need, which is why we gravitated towards this area. One of my students, he joined my program about 6 months ago, and he has completed his first ever student accommodation investment. Go check out his video. I'll put a link to the case study in this video. He bought an 11-bed house in Durban, in Pietermaritzburg. So here you can see some of the inside. There's a main house with a bunch of rooms in it, and then there's a cottage at the back. The blue house, or the blue structure, is the house at the back. So the bond on this property is 14,000. Utilities, provisions, he's also accounted for the 10-month cycle as opposed to the 12-month cycle, making 35,000 Rand in rental and walking away with a 3,900 Rand positive cash flow off day one. Now, the big thing about investing in student accommodation, you have to run your numbers, you have to have the proximity, and you have to have the yield. So what I thought I'd do is I'd take you to Hatfield, the area that I grew up in and the area I studied in, to show you what I think of that area as a potential student accommodation investment space.
So today we're driving through my hometown of Pretoria, where I went to university, and we're going to be exploring one of what I consider the most profitable cash flow strategies, which is student accommodation. So right now we're driving here on Atterbury Road, heading past Menlyn, which is a very famous and well-known shopping mall here in the heart of Pretoria, and we're essentially heading towards the University of Pretoria. Now, student accommodation, in my opinion, is a great strategy for cash flow because it's quite easy to multi-let. You know, if you have a one-bedroom apartment with one person staying there, it's very hard to find enough rental yield to have a cash flow positive situation. But if you can find a one-bedroom that can house 2 or 3 different people, you can substantially increase your cash flow. And that's exactly what the whole student accommodation vibe is about. It's about buying, you know, let's say you're going to do the commune strategy where you buy a house, a 5-bedroom house, and in each bedroom you put 2 students. With 2 students in each room, each paying 3,000 Rand across 5 rooms, you're looking at 30,000 Rand in terms of rental. Whereas if you had to rent that out to a family, you know, you'd probably be lucky to get 10, 12, maybe 15. So the reason why a lot of people gravitate towards student accommodation is because of the yield, is because of the potential of positive cash flow. But what a lot of people don't know is that there's a lot of drawbacks to student accommodation. In fact, there are 3 main challenges that come with this strategy of student accommodation. Challenge number 1 is you're looking at a high vacancy rate. You know, students rent 10 months of the year. They don't rent 12 months of the year. So for the 2 months, usually between, December and January, students are on leave. They're raging in Durban or Belito or wherever it is. They're holidaying. They're taking well-deserved time off. And during those 2 months, you're not making any income, right? So you have to be very clever with managing your cash flow during the 10 months so that you've got the savings and the capital to still pay your bond and all the expenses related to running the property for those 2 months that the students aren't paying. The second big challenge is management. Managing students is very difficult, much more difficult than a residential home where you've got a family living there. And the reason is simple. You know, the kids don't see this as a house or a home. They see it as their personal party zone. So managing students takes a lot of time and a lot of effort. Now, if you've got a good letting or rental agent that can do the heavy lifting for you, that's fantastic. But if you're an investor who's going to manage this yourself, you have to allocate 2 to 3 hours a week of your time to managing this asset. One of the things that we've done in our student digs is to put a restriction on Wi-Fi usage. So each student is allowed to join our Wi-Fi, but if they miss payments or their parents don't pay the rent on time, we switch off their Wi-Fi. And it's just a simple technique to incentivize kids to go and chase their parents for payment. So instead of me going to go and moan and complain and get the parents to pay, we switch off the kids' access to Wi-Fi, and the parents get harassed by the kid and eventually they pay. Now, putting each kid onto the system and then switching off and switching on internet takes time. So that's just an example of the heightened level of management and time and effort that it takes to manage this strategy. The third and final, and probably the most important challenge within student accommodation is high maintenance costs. If you think of the example I used before, the 5-bedroom house where you've got 15 students living, instead of the door being opened once or twice per day like it would normally have been done with a family living there, it's now open 10, 12, 15, 20 times because each student is going in and out, in and out, in and out. So you have to change the locks every 3, 4, 5 months. The shower is now being used by 10 people instead of the 3 people that it was normally accustomed to housing. So whenever you go the multi-let route, where you're putting as many people legally within a property that you can, to increase the cash flow, you've got to understand that your management and your maintenance then also escalates because you've got more people consuming. Your electricity, your water, those consumptive-based costs also increase. Right? So when you're running your numbers, make sure that you're looking at those kind of things. We're here now at the corner of Linwood Road and Atterbury. So we're starting to slowly get into the student zone. And we're going to be driving past a couple of different kinds of strategies that one can do. One of them is to do a commune. You know, you buy the 5-bedroom house, you put in as many students as you can legally do within the zoning of that building. You can also buy a studio apartment, which is a little bit more high income, high luxury. Your cash flow tends to suffer in those ones. You can do a block of flats. We'll drive past a hostel or a residency to see what that would look like. So there's different ways in which you can cater to a student's needs. What you've got to realize though is that you're going to have to run your numbers on each deal. If you're going Hatfield, Brooklyn, Linwood, some of the more suburban high income areas, your yield is going to be less than if you go to your low income areas. That's always the case. Your affluent areas attract more capital appreciation. Your low income areas attract rental yield. So if you want more rental yield, you'll probably need to go to your lower income suburbs that are still accessible to the University of Pretoria. Areas like Arcadia, Sunnyside, Pretoria, CBD. Whenever I'm considering a student accommodation area, I'll drive in the area and I'll see how many people are walking, how many people are cycling. If I'm seeing a lot of activity, that's a good sign. That means it's probably within the proximity that I want of the university. Now we're on a road where literally in front of us is the University of Pretoria. So a couple of meters away from us and we're at the university. And here's a prime location for a student investment. So this building or block of flats is called Unilofts. This was built by a developer and a company. And what you can do as a individual investor is buy one of these units. So these units are between 1, 2, and 3 bedrooms. Depending on how it's laid out, you could potentially look to multi-let it, maybe putting 2 students per room. But these ones are built more for the intention of single lets. So your cash flow on these kind of investments is going to be low. You're going to have low risk because the tenant will likely pay all the time. This proximity to the university is amazing. You're never going to struggle to find and fill the unit with tenants. But because you're going to struggle to multi-let, your cash flow is going to suffer. And this could be a great starting out investment. If you want something that's low risk, low return, consistently going to be filled, this is the perfect kind of investment. And here we are at the University of Pretoria. So you can see it's literally within walking distance, which is a huge plus when trying to find students to fill the unit. We're now heading towards what was previously known as the Square, Hatfield Square, famously known for its nightlife and all of the things that go with a nightlife. It's changed substantially. There's still a few nightclubs. I can see here a Springbok Bar. It was a place we came a couple times to have a few dops. Here you can see the Square 2.0. It's changed substantially from a heavy nightclub to more of a commercial industrial location, but there's some nice restaurants. What you'll notice here, again, we're in the prime location for student accommodation. There's several high sky-rise buildings where developers have come and built up a whole bunch of units. Again, you can buy into a single let, you can make a decent cash flow. Your return is going to be a bit low, but your risk is also going to be low. You've got a whole bunch of residencies as well. So you can find opportunity to rent to students, because this is where the students want to be. They want to be in the hustle and bustle. They want to be in the vibe. They want to be close to nightlife. They want to be close to the university. And they want to have the student experience. So over there you can see a building called The Fields. That's similar to the Unilofts. It's again a developer who's bought some prime real estate and has shot up a block of flats that, again, you as an individual investor can buy, rent out to students. Your yield is going to be a bit lower. Here on the left, we've also got some recent developments. This was not here when I was studying. So Hatfield studios, this used to be empty land. So developers have come in here and they've made some big purchases, and they've definitely, I think, gotten a good return on investment. Here is another block of flats. So I think you're starting to see that whenever you're in the right space for student accommodation, you're going to see a lot of activity. And as long as you're in close proximity of the university, that's the most important need that the students have. So security is important, Wi-Fi is important, but by far the most important expectation is to be within walking distance of the university. What I've noticed since our short arrival here and our short drive around is that this place has changed tremendously. I was here 10 years ago, and most of the accommodation that was available was either some of the residents, some of the hostels, and a couple of houses that were being used as communes. And what I've seen now, especially on the main roads here, close in proximity to the university, everything has been broken down, and there's just developers now all over the place. The amount of student accommodation that has been added here to Hatfield is phenomenal. I think I've seen 20, 30 sky-rise buildings that have been added since I was at university. If that's not telling you that there's a huge, massive need and demand for student accommodation, then nothing will tell you that. I think there's potentially too much activity happening here in Hatfield now. We're going to get to a point where there's an oversupply and under demand, especially with COVID, which impacted the student accommodation market quite severely. Now, where we're at now is more of a house commune kind of strategy. So if you look at this house here on the left, this would be an example of a commune. So, you've got a house in a relatively quiet street, which is, again, close proximity to the university. Students feel safe because there's security fencing. And this kind of house is probably your 5-bedroom house where you're putting 1 or 2 students in per room. Parents love this kind of investment for their kids. They want the quiet suburb, but still within the close proximity and the security that goes with it. So in summary, I think student accommodation is a fantastic opportunity. There's definitely been growth from what I can see here. If you haven't looked at student accommodation as a strategy yet, and you're willing to deal with the management and the maintenance that comes with it, it's a great investment for you to get a positive cash flow.
The student town strategy. That's what I usually call areas where student housing works really well. You've got your Hatfield, you've got your UJ, your UCT, you've got all your big universities, your colleges, and your educational institutions. All of those within a proximity of 2 to 5 Ks are perfect areas for student housing. And student housing has got great yield, it's got great potential to be cash flow positive. Just remember that when you are working with multiple tenants, especially students, that your management does become quite high, and the time required to invest to make this deal work is high.
I hope you enjoyed that video. Give it a thumbs up if you did. Please go and check out my YouTube membership. You get access to exclusive content. I'll also analyze live deals on your behalf. So go check out my YouTube membership for that and so much more.